Welcome to Life and Food with Chef Mimi, where the art of living meets the joy of cooking. In 2020, Mimi transformed her life through her culinary skills, creating macro-balanced meals that led to an astounding 85-pound weight loss. So join us as we delve into her secrets for leading an amazing life while still enjoying incredible food, here on Life and Food with Chef Mimi.
Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Tonight we're going to talk about New Year's resolutions and why they suck. I know that you don't like New Year's resolutions, probably not as much as I hate them, but you don't like them.
It's funny because for someone who really doesn't like New Year's resolutions, I make an awful lot of New Year's goals. They just look really different. I think that I approached them in a really negative way when I was younger, when I first started thinking about making resolutions. The idea of that, it's New Year's Day, it's a fresh new year, what are the amazing things I'm going to do this year? And I'm an all or nothing sort of person. And it took me a long time to figure out sort of how to not let perfect get in the way of good. And it's still something that I work on all the time. But what would happen is that I would set up these outrageous goals. I'm going to drink 120 ounces of water every day. I'm going to work out for an hour every day. I'm going to lose 200 pounds. Just absolutely unattainable, ridiculous things. And then I would fail within the first 2 days of the year and then be like, well, this is stupid. And I would toss the entire list. So I became a person who absolutely despised quote unquote New Year's resolutions. Anyone who would talk about making them, I would be scoffing like, oh gosh, yeah, New Year's resolutions, those are terrible. Oh no, I don't do that. Those are just the worst. And that actually started changing for me about, I guess it would be 5, 6 years ago. And what changed for me is that one of my sisters started talking about a podcast that she was listening to and about an author that she liked who was the host of this podcast. So the woman's name is Gretchen Rubin, and the book I believe is called The Happiness Project. And I don't know what the name of the podcast is because honestly, I don't listen to it. I have a long list of podcasts that I already listen to throughout the week, and I don't really have the bandwidth for another one. But I have looked at blog posts of hers. She has some really interesting personality tests that she does on her site. She just has a really unique way of approaching sort of who you are and what kind of goals work the best for certain people, what your tendencies are, and how you can achieve success and happiness based on the type of person that you are. So I find her eminently interesting. And what she started doing was a blank in blank list. So it was a number based on the number of years. So it was, for example, 19 in 2019. So it was a list of 19 things that she wanted to accomplish in 2019. So it was very intentional. There was fun things on there. It was just a really interesting way of approaching resolutions. And it kind of sparked something in me. The other thing that she would do is she would choose an intentional word for the year. And she has actually, if you are interested in this and you want to go listen to her podcast, fantastic. I can link that in the comments. And also, I can link some of the personality tests that she has. And I believe that it's very easy to find on her website a printable version of the 19 and 19 or 20 and 20, or now as we are here in the 24 and 24 list. So you can fill in sort of her template and hang that up. I actually make my own because that's who I am. So I started it. My sister was doing it, and so there were 3 of us, maybe 4 of us at the time, 3 of my sisters and myself. So the 4 of us were putting together this list together. And we were each bouncing ideas off of each other, like, oh, well, here's what I put on my list. Are you doing, what are you doing on your list? What are your fun things that you want to do? What are your family things that you want to do? And it was a lot more joyful of a process. It didn't feel so much like all the ways in which, I look at the year before and I look at how badly I failed at things. And now I'm going to punish myself to become a better version of myself in the year going forward, but not in any enjoyable way. So that really changed the perspective for me. And I've been doing it since I started, and I've been doing it with my sisters every year. And we've gone through different variations. For example, my one sister this year themed hers. I think she has 5 different categories, and they all start with R. So there's one that's like, recreation, and there's one that's rest. And, it's really interesting how everyone approaches it in a different way. Throughout the process of doing this list every year for the last 5 or 6 years, I have come up with sort of some tips and tricks that I use for myself that have made this process far less of a to-do list and much more of a forward trajectory as to how I want my life, my family's life, my relationships to look going forward into the next year. For me, resolutions are no longer these wild swings, sort of what you might consider a quick fix solution, and more small buildable increments of things that I want to continue improving on. That has really changed my perspective, and I am now a person who really enjoys making these goal lists and really enjoys talking to other people about them. So I'll still sit here till my dying day and say New Year's resolutions suck. They really do. But I think it's because the connotation that they have and the way that we've been trained by society to approach them is this idea that you have to change your entire self and go into the new year already dreading all of these hard, horrible things that you're going to have to do, instead of making an intentional list of small, achievable goals that you want to continue building on, with room on that list for joyful, fun things that you haven't gotten to, or you haven't prioritized for yourself, or you haven't prioritized for your marriage or for your relationship with your kids. Wonderful, beautiful things that are recreational and restful, to use some of my sister's terms, instead of punishing to yourself.
All right, so why don't you give us a few examples of the things that you put onto your list for this year?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like I have some that are kind of gimmies, some items that I already know I'm going to accomplish, but it's important for me to still write them down and have them hanging up in a place where I can see them every day. So first of all, I kind of ruminate for a while about my word of the year, and that's almost sometimes the hardest thing for me to pick. But usually it surfaces for me. I feel like it's something that I'm talking about a lot or I'm thinking about a lot. And it's funny because if you've been listening to the podcast, you already know how much I talk about this word, but my word for 2024 is discipline. So I'm talking about some gimme things on the list here. One of them is being sober in 2024. I've had that on each of my lists for the last 3 years because I've been sober for 3 years and 3 months. I have an app on my phone that I could pull up and tell you exactly how many days I've been sober because it's that important to me that I track it. So I already know that's not going to be hard for me to not drink this year. I'm just a sober person. I don't drink anymore. But it's still important for me to write that down because it's just cementing who I am, right? Like, this is me. This is a choice that I'm making for this year. I might not have to work super hard at it, but every time I look at that list, I'm going to look at that line item and know that I want to check that off at the end of the year. So it's just like an extra layer for me, but yeah, kind of a gimme. And then there's silly stuff, like little things around the house that drive me crazy.
You mean like our children?
Yes, so one of the things on the list is, to sell all the children this year. No, but with our kids, they have Chromebooks that they utilize for homeschool. They have headphones that they use for homeschool that they're charging. We have, they have watches that are how we communicate with them. I've got my headphones. One of them has an MP3 player, and I'm an Apple girl, so I have Apple Watch chargers all over the house, and my specific Apple chargers. And Joe is an Android guy, so he's got his Android chargers, and we have piles of cords everywhere. and it is driving me bananas. And so one of the things that I want to figure out this year is some sort of charging station that can be hidden away where all of the different chargers are there, and that's not just a snarled pile of cords, and whoever needs to charge whatever can open that up and they can place their device on the charger without making a gigantic mess and making one whole counter of my kitchen unusable. I'm giving you some examples of here, right? Like an easy one for me that's kind of a gimme, a silly one. I mean, it feels silly to me because it's such a small thing. It wouldn't have to be on my list, but it's also one of those things that like I just live with. I just keep moving the piles of cords around and it bugs me, and it bugs me every day. And why wouldn't I put something on that list that, yes, it might take a little bit of an investment and maybe some creative thinking about where we're going to do this, but it's going to provide so much peace going forward and so much organization going forward. Some of the things on my list are really big. I want to go to Cleveland this year and visit my family. We did that 2 summers ago. We had a great time. We tried to make it this past summer and it just didn't work out with schedules and things like that. And the kids were so upset that we didn't go. And so I'm making that a priority. It's not just, oh, I want to go to Cleveland this summer. It's on my list, so it's going to happen. I have some weight loss goals. I'm creeping up on a total 100-pound loss, and that's on there for this year. Even some health stuff, like I am way overdue for a mammogram. And so scheduling and completing a mammogram is on my list for the year. That's self-care. All of these things are self-care. Some of them just look a little different. I've got some gym stuff on there, some strength stuff. I want to be able to do 10 perfect push-ups. So like not dropping to my knees, hand position correct, strong, like 10 really perfect push-ups in a row. And I'm going to work on that all year. Even, stuff that's tiny, like when I lean down and touch my toes, I can almost put my hands flat on the floor, but not quite. And I've been working on that for a while. And I finally decided that this year I'm going to work on my flexibility until when I lean down to touch my toes, I can put my hands flat on the floor. So those are just some little things on the list, just to give you an example that it's not all like, I'm going to drink X amount of water. I'm going to work out every day. I'm going to stuff that's not attainable at all. These are little things that either bring me joy or are going to help me accomplish something or feel really good, but they're also really attainable.
I think sometimes coming up with a New Year's resolution in the first place can be incredibly stressful. At least I know it was for me.
Yeah, I really struggled with that because, December is very busy. Christmas is a really big deal in our home, and we have a lot of children, and it's a lot of gifts, it's a lot of prep. And I feel very unable to take on the new year, like the day that it starts. Through the course of doing these lists for the past, 6 years, I'm going to tell you my secret, okay? So you can't tell anyone else, is that I don't start my New Year's resolutions or my New Year's goals on January 1st. I actually start them on February 1st. And what I have found in the process of doing this is that I need to take stock of the new year. I almost have to get like a feeling for it before I can commit to what I want to do inside of it. So what that means is that my goals carry through from February 1st to February 1st each year instead of January 1st to January 1st. Because you know what? There's no New Year's resolution police. No one's going to show up at your house and say, give me that list. It's December 31st. Whatever you didn't complete, that's it. It's over. And you better have that new list posted tomorrow morning on your pantry door or else it doesn't count. There's literally no one's going to check. You're an adult and you can do what you want. And that can be harmful things or that can be amazing things. So I decided that I wasn't going to have a total deadline for any of my items. In other words, if I don't complete them by February 1st of the following year, I look at them and I say, was this really something that should have gotten done this year? Or was this just kind of silly that I put on the list to kind of make my 22 or 23 or 24 items? And so what I do is then if I really do want to get it done and it is important to me and I'm like, oh man, I wish I had accomplished that, I carry it forward into the next year. Or sometimes I just take it off the list and think, that was silly. There was no point in that. And I don't let that reflect on me at all. I don't look at that list and say, oh, I didn't complete it. I completed everything on it that was important. I completed everything on it that brought me joy and that felt like it was bettering me. But sometimes you put stuff on your list And then your year changes and you think like, that really no longer serves me. Or you go try something out. Maybe it's that you want to get really good at horseback riding and you go do 2 lessons and then you're like, actually, no, I really don't want to do this. It's fine to then take it off your list or just leave it on there and take it off the next year. There are literally no rules and there's no one checking up on you. Now you can have accountability for some of these items. If it's to get a specific number of workouts in a year, great. Make sure you are meeting someone at the gym or you're going to a class or you have some accountability there. Or if you want to be sober for the year, then make sure that whoever you live with knows that you're not drinking anymore this year, or you're not drinking these months this year, or whatever it might be. If you need accountability on those, that's fine. But it is your list, and you're the only person that can hold yourself accountable to the list. And if you decide halfway through the year that there's certain things on the list that no longer serve you, well, then you don't have to complete them just as a grudge match. Like, you get to put them down. So that is the number one thing I think that has made me really successful with these lists, is that I stopped trying to make them in the absolute chaos of December when I'm trying to close out all sorts of things for the year. And then in that breath pause that you have between Christmas and New Year's, where it's just kind of like time is immaterial and the kids are wandering around eating chocolate at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you don't know what day it is. That's not a really good headspace in which to focus on the year ahead and think, what do I want to get done? However, you come out of that, it's January 1st, you're hurled headlong into the new year and you start getting a feel for what that year is going to look like, right? You just start getting that feeling of like, okay, hey, 2024, all right, I want to make some changes this year. I want to build on some things that I did last year. And I give myself that whole month of January. I jot things down on notebook paper. I write things down in my phone. I Google things. No idea is too silly. And sometimes I end up with 40 ideas and I have to whittle it down to 24. And then sometimes I feel like I'm really pushing for the last couple items. But I try to make sure that it's really genuine. And that's the other thing too, is that you don't have to do a 24 and 24. You could set yourself an arbitrary number like 10 items, or you could just pick your top 5. It doesn't have to be big. It can look however you want. This is just what works for me. I love the play on the number of items for the year that it represents. I usually do something like 24 themed. For example, this year it's read 24 books. I can probably really easily hit that, but also I don't read as much because I'm busy, and so it reminds me that I want to at least be reading 2 books a month, which to me is really doable.
It's frustrating paying for mail order meals that taste like cafeteria food. So say goodbye to paying for blah and hello to Mimi's Macros, where flavor meets convenience. Mimi ensures that every dish is a culinary masterpiece. In fact, Mimi is so confident that you will love her food that there are no subscriptions and no minimums. That's right, you can order as little or as much as you want with no obligations. Visit mimismacros.com to check delivery availability in your area. Mimi's Macros. Let us do the cooking, you focus on life.
All right, now there's something there that you mentioned, and I want to stop for a minute and put my finger on it because, quite honestly, I think it's the thing that turns out to be the biggest struggle, and that is if you put something on that list and then you don't accomplish it. How do you actually do that where you find the self-compassion to say that's okay? I mean, it sounds easy to say, but I know for a lot of us it's actually something that's really hard to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can totally relate to that. I feel like I'm a recovering perfectionist. If there's a box to check, I want to check it. And if I didn't check every box, well, then it doesn't matter that I checked 99.9% of the boxes. I didn't check them all. So it wasn't perfect. So therefore, the whole thing sucked. And that's really what I'm recovering from in my life in multiple aspects. I think what it is that when you make the list, you have to come at it already with that in mind. So you don't put things down. And trust me, we know ourselves. And I catch myself sometimes writing something down. For example, I was writing down that I wanted to do a specific number of intentional workouts. And the first number that I came up with and wrote down, I looked at it and I thought, that is going to be a major stretch. And if I'm sick at all, or the kids are sick, or we go on vacation, there is a good chance I won't hit that number, and that will probably make me feel like crap. So you know what? I knocked like 20 off that number because I'm like, you know what? Who cares if I make it a number that's easy for me to hit? I'm still going to hit it, and it still means I'm moving my body like on a regular basis, and I'm having these very intentional, exercise sessions or workouts or body movement sessions. You'll know, you start to write something down and you think, oh boy, I don't know if I can do that. Boy, you can already tell when you're setting yourself up for failure. Just don't set yourself up for failure. If you're that sort of person where you really struggle with unmet goals, guess what? You have lots of years in front of you to do this. Start this year with 5 things that you absolutely know you can accomplish. They're small, they're measurable, and you can build on them. Okay? So you start with those 5 items, and by the time December 31st rolls around, you have hit that. No problem. You breeze through that list. And now you can look at that list and be like, man, I killed that list. I destroyed it. All right? Now I'm going to take those 5 and make them a little harder, or I'm going to go from 5 to 10. But you still make them achievable, measurable, right? Nothing crazy, and you just build on it. Don't set yourself up for failure immediately. That's kind of what I was talking about at the beginning. Why when people talk about New Year's resolutions, I'm like, yeah, they suck. Because oftentimes New Year's resolutions are things that are mean to ourselves, that are designed to be punishing, and that we probably can't live up to. So just sidestep that completely and make it something that really works for you. Make it something that's going to be joyful for you. I mean, you don't even have to pick any fitness stuff. You can literally just make it be smile at 10 random people in the grocery store this year. Well, that's easy. I mean, at least for me, I'm a total creeper in Kroger, right? I'm like, I'll come up to people and be like, oh, have you ever eaten that? That's my favorite brand. I'm that person in Kroger. Okay. So that would be easy for me. I'd get that done in the first week. But in other words, it doesn't have to be stuff where I'm going to be a smaller size. I'm going to be unless that's something you really want to work on. It can be just stuff to bring more joy into your life, to bring more movement into your life. You can just write down, start a yoga practice. Well, if you don't start it till June, guess what? You still started it. If you don't start it till November, guess what? You still started it. And if you don't start it at all, well, then you can look at that and say, do I actually really like yoga? Because I had the opportunity this year and I didn't start a yoga practice. So maybe I pick something else this coming year. You just have to adjust as you go.
All right. So are there other criteria to this? Like, do you want to make sure that what you put down is not something overly broad, like I'm going to lose weight? Do you want to make sure that that's defined as something more like I'm going to lose this much weight by June, or I'm going to run a 5K?
Well, yeah, that's, I think what we would call like a measurable goal. So it's really hard to know when you write something down like that. You could just write down lose weight. Okay, well, what does that look like? How much weight do you want to lose? It's something where it's too broad. It's not going to be specific enough for you to have any action plans. Because really, for each of these things, so for example, the number one thing on my list is family photos. All right, that's measurable because I'm either going to end up with a set of family photos at the end of this year or I'm not. So I either did it or I didn't do it. Now, action plan. When do I want to do them? Do I want to do Christmas photos? Do I want to do just a summer session, like an outside session? Do I want to do some sort of like cute fall number with leaves? I don't know, because we don't really do family photos because we have 7 kids and it is a nightmare. But I really, really, really want to get it done. So I have to break that down. Okay, when in the year do I want to do it? All right, decide that. Who? Do I want to find a place that's doing minis? Do I want to just, poll my Facebook friends and say, like, who knows a really fantastic photographer that's great with big families? I'm going to have to, so I have to find the person. I have to decide when it's going to happen. I have to budget for it. Okay. So if it's going to be, let's say, $350, then I have to look at that and say, okay, I want to be able to set that money aside so that we can afford it when the time comes. And then I have to make a plan for what everyone's going to wear. Like, there's a lot of steps to that. So your goal might be kind of broad. It's still measurable, right? You have to either have the achieved desired outcome at the end or not. But then each of these goals, you should be able to almost make a sub-goal list underneath and say, like, well, here's what I need to do to get to that goal. If your goal is lose 10 pounds by June, or lose 10 pounds this year, well, then you look at that and say, all right, I have to lose an average of 1 pound a month. Okay. So that is a quarter of a pound every week, or, let's just say a half a pound every 2 weeks. All right. How much do I need to restrict my calories for that? Okay. Well, I should probably shave off 100 calories a day off of what I'm eating right now. Well, what is that? Well, it's that nightly, fourth of a cup of ice cream. Although I don't know anyone who actually eats a fourth of a cup of ice cream at a time, except for maybe me because I'm weird. But, it might look like that where you say, like, okay, here's how I'm going to achieve this. Or I'm going to give up that, that Coke that I drink every day at lunch. I'm just going to give up soda. And probably just doing that is going to get me to that 10-pound loss at the end of the year. Or you might be like, I want to lose 50 pounds this year. All right, well, that's going to take a lot more work. That's going to take a lot more action items. And that's not the sort of thing where you can wait till June and then say, well, now I have 6 months to lose my 50 pounds. You got to look at that now and say, like, all right, what am I going to do? What changes am I going to make on a regular daily basis going forward? It's nothing crazy. You don't have to lose 50 pounds in a month. You have an entire year to get it done, but you've got to break down each of these things into smaller, actionable items. So specific goals are better than broad goals. Measurable goals are better than goals that have no real measurement. Like, be a happier person. I mean, are you? Maybe, but give yourself something you can actually measure, something you can check off so that you know you're improving in that area. And then something I already talked about too is making it attainable. Don't set yourself up for failure immediately, right? You've got to make it something that it's either an easy gimme or it's well within the range of possibility for you to do that, right? It's not something where you're going to fail immediately and then you're going to chuck the whole list in the bin. I talk about this all the time as it relates to diet, as it relates to fitness, as it relates to all the things in life. Like, don't let perfect get in the way of good. Good is great, and if you wait for perfect, it's never going to happen. And so if you're always waiting for perfect, you'll never get anything done. So, go for good. And then I love the smaller steps. And I do that for not all of these, obviously. Like, some of these are just kind of like palms on the floor stretch. I'm like, okay, that means I need to work on my flexibility. I need to stretch more. But that's easy for me. I'm like, okay, every time I have a couple minutes and I'm in the kitchen, I'm going to lean down and touch my toes and try to put my palms on the floor. And I'm just going to do that as a matter of habit over the course of the year. So I don't really need to break that down into small steps. That's just something I'm working on. But for example, going to Cleveland this summer, man, that's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of smaller steps. So I will break that down into some smaller steps. Decide on a date, find an Airbnb, make a plan for when I'm out of the kitchen. How many days can I be out of the kitchen? What does that look like as far as coverage for me? What does that look like as far as Joe taking vacation time from work, etc.? So I love the idea of some of the bigger ones, breaking it down into a couple smaller steps, because then you can take action on the smaller steps, and before you know it, you're at that big goal. And then you have to stay flexible and adapt. Like I said, if you set something up where you want to be a yoga master at the end of the year and you're 6 months in and you still haven't started a yoga practice, and you're like, maybe it sounded good when I made the list, but maybe I don't do that this year. And then it's okay, even in the middle of the year, to just cross an item out. Just scribble it out so you can't even see it anymore and just be like, yeah, no, that wasn't for me. A different person, a different me made that list earlier in the year, and now the real me is going to come back through the list and say, like, well, this works and this doesn't. So you have to stay flexible and you have to adapt. I mean, you might have a specific fitness goal and you might tear your Achilles tendon and be stuck in a boot for 6 months. I mean, God forbid, but you've got to remember that, like, you can plan, but life is going to happen, and you've got to make the stuff that you want to have happen around life. And life does not always work with us very well. For the larger goals where I have the smaller steps, I like to track my progress regularly. And if there's a specific number that I've set, I like to have little boxes that I can check off. So one of them is 6 date nights this year for Joe and I. We used to do regular date nights, and then with the business and with so many kids, that is really something that we have struggled to make a priority. So I'm like, okay, this is every 2 months. We can do this. We can do a date night every 2 months this year. But I am going to put 6 little check marks, and every time we do a date night, I'm going to check it off. Next to my read 24 books this year, I am going to put 24 little check marks, and I'm going to check them off because I want to see that progress. I want to track that progress through the year as I'm going. And those are easy, like quick little wins, right? If you're feeling a little negative about your list, or you feel like there might be a lot on there, but you can go through and check off, oh, I did this, I did 1 of 10 of these, okay? And then you can start seeing that progress, and that gives you that self-confidence that shows you like, oh, I am achieving, I am working on this stuff, I am improving, and you're just going to build from there. You have to get accountability. I already talked about that, or support for some of these things. Some of these things are going to be hard to get done on their own. Like you might just need help to make it happen. I highly, highly recommend, if there's some mental health changes you need to make, getting in with a fantastic therapist. If there's some sobriety changes you need to make, get a sponsor of some type, even if it's not a traditional sponsor through AA. Get someone who knows the struggle and is working through that with you. If it's a weight or fitness goal, get a trainer, get a nutritionist, or have a gym buddy. Go to a class where they expect you to show up every Wednesday, and they'll call you out on it if you don't show up. Make sure you have that accountability in place for the ones where you know that you might need a little bit of extra help getting over that list item, or you might need just a little bit of someone holding you to it. Celebrate your small victories. That's when I was talking about the little check marks. That's super helpful for me, because even if I feel like I'm not checking off a lot of the big items, I'm sometimes checking off the small things. I did decide on dates for Cleveland. My sister and I know what week that's happening. I did get coverage for myself at the kitchen. Check that off. I haven't found an Airbnb yet, but I've gotten, 4 of my 6 items done to make this thing happen this summer. And that is really helpful too. Those little victories, they'll keep you motivated. They'll keep you going. And then, the self-compassion thing too is just, you might make a list this year, and by, March, you're like, this is not for me. That's fine. I don't think list making is for everyone. I don't think that, everyone has the personality for it. Some people just do better kind of winging it, or, staying accountable in their own heads to something. I'm a type A personality. I have been a list maker from the time I was able to write. I absolutely love lists. I love posting them up where I can see them. I like looking at them. I like checking things off of them. So what works for me might not work for you. I'm just sharing, kind of my approach. So if you get into this process and you hate it, or it's stealing all the joy from 2024 already, just thinking about it, then maybe it's not the right time for you. Or maybe you need to approach it a little differently. Maybe you do something else, like a bucket list in the summer for you and your kids of things you want to get done as a family, fun things, whatever. Or maybe you don't make any lists at all. That's fine too. But you have to forgive yourself, and you have to make sure that you're not holding yourself accountable to someone else's standards. Just because someone else does it doesn't mean that it has to work for you. You have to figure out what works for you and then unapologetically stand in that. So those are just some of the items that have worked for me, some of my little tips and tricks for making a good list and then staying accountable to it, tracking it through the year, and coming out on the other end of the year feeling super sort of happy and excited about what I accomplished and ready to build on that for the next year. I am going to post in the comments some links for Gretchen Rubin's podcast and book and the template for the 24 and 24 in case you want to go hog wild and do the 24 and 24 like crazy me. And then if you have any questions specifically about, certain goals that I've talked about or set, or just goal setting in general, please feel free to add those. I love to teach where I can when I have the knowledge, and we really appreciate you guys.
All right, that's all we've got for this week. Be sure to tune in next week when Mimi is going to delve into one of her areas of expertise, understanding macronutrients. We look forward to seeing you then.